This channel has been a long time coming. I would like to give a shout out to Hood Politics. I've seen many segments of different cities and different stories, but none of them being correct or accurate. This here is Warren, Cali. Everything you see here is going to be straightforward accuracy. Now let's get into it. My first story, this first segment of Warren, Cali, is going to be the Hoovers versus the Neighborhoods. South Central Los Angeles is broken into two sides, the west side and the east side. They're divided by the 110 freeway. The Hoover criminals started in the early 1970s on the west side of Los Angeles as the Hoover Groupers. Around that time, many gangs all over South Central Los Angeles were becoming Crips. Stanley Tookie Williams and Raymond Washington, prominent Crips in the 1970s, convinced the Hoover Groupers to join the Crips. They accepted. By the late 1970s, the Hoovers became one of the most respected and feared Crips in the city. But by the 1980s, they became one of the most hated. As you can see on this map, the Hoovers cover a lot of territory, but this is just a small portion of their territory. They stretch from 52nd to 112th and Hoover. The Hoover consists of many subsets under the Hoover umbrella, starting with the 5 Deuce Hoovers. This is the only Hoover set that remains Crips to this day. The remaining Hoovers are the 5-9 Hoovers, the 7-4s, the 8 Trays, not to get confused with the 8 Tray Gangsters, the 9 Deuces, the 9-4s, the 107s, and 11 Deuces. There used to be a 4-Tray Hoover, but it faded out with many members dying, going to jail, and just a switch in the overall neighborhood. Now this area is considered the Dark Side's 40s neighborhood Crips territory, which would be the rivals to the Hoovers. The Hoovers took on a reputation in the 80s and the 90s as one of the grimiest and shadiest hoods in Los Angeles, taking on anyone who challenged them from the Crips to the Bloods and even some Serrano gangs, gaining them the motto EBK, which stands for Everybody Killer, which caused them many fallouts and many beefs in LA. LA was split into 2 different cards, the Gangster Crip card and the Neighborhood Crip card. The Hoovers chose neither because they had beef with every neighborhood gang, which we'll get into in a minute, and most of the Gangster Crip gangs. With all the beef coming from both cards, Hoovers decided to drop the Crip from their identity and just become criminals. With most of their rivals being Crips, they thought why remain a Crip faction? Orange would become the most identifiable color with the Hoovers, and primary color, and so with the Houston Astro hat to identify the H in Hoover. So by the mid-90s, the Hoover Crips was no longer, but you still may hear some OGs in their 40s and upbringing still refer to themselves as Crips. But for the last few decades, the Hoovers have been referred to as criminals. Now let's get into their rivals, the Neighborhood Crips. The Neighborhood Crips consists of many different sets. You might be most familiar with the Rollin' 60 Crips, which famous rapper Nipsey Hussle was from. But the Neighborhood Crips consists of over 30 different gangs in this card, some being the East Coast Crips, which has many different subsets under that umbrella. Others in the Neighborhood card include the Rollin' 40s, the Rollin' 90s, as well as the Rollin' 100s. They all fall under the Neighborhood card. Rollin' 30s are a close ally of the Neighborhood card, but they are not a Neighborhood card. They are in a Rollin' alliance, which includes the 30s, the 40s, the 60s, the 90s, the 100s as well. In my opinion, I believe this is the biggest card with so many gangs and those gangs having huge numbers. The Neighborhood Crips started a little bit after 1979, after the war began between the Rollin' 60 Crips and the 8 Tray Gangsters. This war started over a Rollin' 60's brother being killed by 8 Tray Gangster. This war left many picking sides. Some choosing the Rollin' 60s, others choosing the 8 Tray Gangsters. According to Munster Cody, a reputable 8 Tray Gangster Crip, in his book, The Autobiography of a LA Gang Member, page 267, he spotted in 1984 a meeting between the Rollin' 60s, the Raymond Crips, and other Crip neighborhoods, which would be a meeting to form an allegiance against other gangs that were their rivals. That would be the Hoovers and any other gang claiming Gangster Crip. The Hoovers are hated by some gangs for different reasons. Shout out to Kev Mack for the insight on all the hoods from his interviews with many neighborhood gangs. You can see the outlooks on why some rivalry started with the Hoovers. Here's Big U, an OG member of the Rolling 60s. Crips a part of the neighborhood card, describing incidents in the late 70s.
We used to go to, we was in Horseman. That was my first time going there, and we got into it with the Hoovers. I mean, I don't think we ever got along with the Hoovers in my whole existence. And this had to be like 79, even before we was fighting H-Way gangsters. The homies get into it with the Hoovers, and the homies and the Hoovers got into it in the skating ring. And I remember we squabbling.
Big U describes the Hoover beef starting back in the late 1970s. Here's another OG member of the neighborhood Crip card, of the Raymond set to be exact, also sharing his run-ins with the Hoovers in that era.
Fights with y'all, but everybody don't realize the Hoovers started hating us because of our alliance with the 60s. And all that shit started in the 80s, y'all and them. Who did they see together all the time? What, 60s over here, Raymond's on Bryanhurst, 8th Ave, 11th Ave, you know.
The Raymond Hoover beef is the 80s, the 70s beef?
It's a 70s beef, but it was no... I was going to Henry Clay, man, in the 70s, man, and we had fist fights because they thought they were stronger than us.
Because you ain't knowing, you ain't hearing about us, nigga. We getting into it, everybody across the army. Blocks too. I said, my hood too. He said, yeah, cuz. He said, nigga, every day, nigga, we been getting up at the Washington at the school let out, homie. We getting down. He said, man, he said, Hawk, you been in jail, nigga. When you go to your hood, homie, they gonna let you know what's been going on. I said, damn, homie, I thought that shit got squared away, man, when I been going to you. He said, oh no, he came back, man. He said, man, we fighting like a motherfucker. He said,
with over 4 decades of bloodshed between the Hoovers and gangs in the neighborhood card, I would like to take a deep dive into a few cases that have happened in the past between the Hoovers and the neighborhood card. This channel doesn't condone snitching or putting anyone in jail. Everything said about these cases are public record. It wouldn't affect or get anyone additional jail time. Our first case starts in July 11, 1989, of the now non-existent set of the Fort Trey Hoovers. 4 members of the Fort Trey Hoovers, Maurice Taylor, Judah Bean, 8 Ball, and Big Black, stood on the corner of 43rd and Kansas. Things quickly went bad when a man named Troy Mitchell yelled from a nearby apartment building, "Fuck Hoover." Judah Bean led the other 3 Hoovers to Mitchell's apartment and an altercation pursued. After the fight ended, all of the Fort Trey Hoovers went back to the corner of 43rd and Kansas. Mitchell drove by the group with his fellow Rolling 40 gang members and opened fire on the group, hitting Big Black in the ankle and Judah Bean in the arm. Big Black was taken to the hospital, and Judah Bean refused and retreated to an unhouse nearby. Kimberly Johnson, Judah Bean's girlfriend, learned of the shooting and rushed to his aid at his aunt's house. She tried to convince him to go to the hospital, but they never got there. En route, Judah Bean asked her to stop in front of Mitchell's apartment. There stood a group of Rolling 40s. One of them held a long-barrel shotgun. Judah Bean rolled down his window and yelled, "I wish you would shoot me." He got out the car and yelled it again. Judah Bean got his wish. Moments later, he would be laying there on the ground with one bullet passed through his neck and lodged into his spine, another in his right leg. Judah Bean's girlfriend would drive off in fear, leaving Judah Bean on the street. People on the street either ran or piled into their cars. Mitchell jumped in the car and made a U-turn and trampled Judah Bean's body. That would be the fatal blow. Mitchell would be charged alone, and he would be charged with second-degree murder. Now, this next case I'm about to get into is about Jessica Marie Williams, a.k.a. Groove, a female member of the H Trey Hoovers. On May 30th, 2008, Joshua Earls was walking from his house on 104th and Manhattan Place when a car pulled up and a passenger with a Yankees hat, which is worn by the neighborhood Crips, asked Earls where was he from. He started to back up, but before he could, he would be shot in the chest, shoulder, and leg. LAPD recovered 10 shell casings at the scene. June 2nd, 2008, on 67 in Vermont, neighbors were hear around 8 gunshots and a voice yell, "Hoover," and see a person with a Yankee hat running away from the scene. 19-year-old Fenton Brown will be found laid on the ground before he died. He said he was shot by a woman who asked where he was from. June 3rd, 2008, on 81st and Hoover, Groove would be stopped by the police. She had on a Yankee hat at the time. She wore to throw off her enemies. She had a .40 caliber pistol in her possession. She asked the arrested officers if they liked her nap hat, which is a diss to neighborhood Crips. Groove would be charged with first-degree murder of Fenton Brown, who she believed was a 6'5" Menlo neighborhood Crip, and the murder of Joshua Earls, who was in the Rolling 100 neighborhood Crip territory when he was murdered. She received 75 years plus life. This will conclude part 1. If you would like a part 2 or other hood beats discussed, like, comment, and subscribe.